Hello, hello. This is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden, and welcome to Shifting Perspectives. So today is a research day. I'm getting ready to build the ultimate formula here. This is the core formula in physics to literally lay out all of human behavior. So here is, in summation, this is how this works. I'm preparing to write the mother lode of all formulas, and I required a baseline. Whenever you walk into the next perspective, it's like looking at all the components scattered all over the floor. And the perspective is all about organizing the components, putting them into order, understanding them, summarizing them, integrating them, and then you get to move on to the next perspective. You get to the next perspective, you get the big picture, and you go, oh my God, the components are all over the floor. And then you spend your entire time collecting all the components again, and you rinse and repeat. And you do that over and over again for every perspective. So I'm currently in the fourth perspective, and I went, oh my God, look at the mess. And now I am organizing insanity. That's what my job is I organize insanity. So, and I need to do exploratory dialogue. This is how I learn, is I basically go, okay, so this is what's going on. And this is in summation, this is what I'm learning at the fourth ethical perspective of the U of I. So this is like probably my fourth video in this fourth perspective series of in summation. And as soon as I get my head wrapped around the big conglomerate, I can write this formula. This formula is a fucking huge formula. It is pulling from physics, logic, geometry, math, the Cartesian coordinate system, ontology, and economics. And I just did a video earlier today. I just uploaded it, and it literally outlines the entire draft of this formula. So now I'm going to start writing out all the detail, but I have to really, truly comprehend its magnitude. And I have to understand this thesis, because authority is at the core. It is all about authority. So the reason why I keep bringing up authority is because when you understand how the 12 ethical perspective stages advance, what you are really doing is everyone paying attention. What you are really doing with authority, with these 12 ethical stages of perspective growth, is you are defining your authority. Now, this is a challenge that every perspective has to deal with at the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and then the fifth. By the time you get to the sixth ethical perspective, you have figured out authority, and you are trying to figure out and realize that you are just as important as everybody else. This is why I refer to them as foundationals, because they are the foundation of the self. You see where we're going with this? The foundation of the self is your self-authority. Big fucking deal. It is such a big deal that it takes 5 ethics to learn. Big fucking deal. 5 fucking ethics. Huge. So when you finally figure out self-authority, you finally stop shifting your authority. It settles down at the 6th perspective. And at the 7th perspective, you have finally learned that you are just as important and as equal as everybody else, and the game changes. Now you enter into the world of metaphysics. Now you can play in the abstract. How do I explain this to you mathematically? There are 12 known ethical perspectives for each level, and there are 4 levels, which means there are 12, 4, 48. There are 48 levels. Five of those levels are spent without authority. 5 out of 48. I have a hunch that that's 12%. So I'm going to check something. I'm going to check. I have a strong hunch that that is 12%, because Mother Nature is funny that way. So I'm just going to do it. Yes. Yep. Of course she is. Of course it's 12%. 5.76. 12% of the ethical stages, only 12, are the undefined, we can't figure out who the authority is. The rest of them, 98%, wait, I'm sorry, 88% have figured it out that it's self-authority. Now, the problem with this is most people are stuck at the fourth ethical perspective. Big eye roll. Which means that the majority of people are only 12% mature. That is how grossly stunted our education is. It's that bad. Now, when you are that grossly stunted, one of the things that you don't realize is the value of self-authority. And that is what is missing, is the true value of self-authority. Self-authority is at the core of all. And it's one of those beautiful words, when you look it up, there's only 18 different meanings. And if you look up the actual cognate of the word, which is author, and if you look at the origin, it actually, from Latin, it means origin. Author, authority, means origin and means author of, which means you get to make the rules, which is exactly what authority, authenticity, and authorship is. It means you are the one in fucking charge. So now there's this big discussion. Who the fuck is in charge? And that's really what we're all fighting about. Who gets to be in charge? Imagine that this is literally just a whole bunch of people arguing over who gets to stand in the front of the line, which is exactly what a bunch of fourth perspectives and foundationals will argue about. Who gets to stand in line? Meanwhile, 88% of the other perspectives, the ones who are at sixth perspective and higher, have figured this out, have settled down, and have stopped debating what the world's self-authority and other authority should be. And that is because the life lesson of foundationals is you guys got to figure out that you're the ones in charge. Now, ironically, not really, quite mathematically and quite logically, every psychologist in the world will tell you, not that their word means anything, every ontologist in the world, every philosophy in the world, every person in the world will tell you that when a person becomes accountable, self-authority, their healing changes completely because they have found self-authority. That happens at the sixth perspective every time, consistently, because it's right. 100% consistency. As soon as somebody hits the sixth perspective, their healing changes. The sixth perspective is the one who goes, oh, look, I am accountable. I am the authority of my life. I am in charge. And once they reach that choice, that decision, that realization, that truth, that lesson, complete game changer. And it never changes again. Never. You are the authority of your life. And instantly, within a few months, mental health literally resolves itself. Every time I've spoken to anybody who is cured of their mental illness, every person says the same thing. I made the choice that I had choice. It is when you realize that you have choice. Now, if you look at the word authority, yeah, the governments have all made it mean to whatever it is they want, which is very common for people who are in charge, because there is a challenge of authority over who gets to make the rules. Now, in the Declaration of Independence, my beautiful Thomas Jefferson says that to be governed must be consensual by the individual, that the individual, this is in the Declaration of Independence, like the third paragraph, that the people have to consent to be governed. And that the moment an individual no longer consents to being governed, the system they can't be governed. And this is very true. according to the 12 ethical perspective stages, as soon as you hit the 6th ethical stage, around the time that you realize you're the one in charge with your self-authority, the very first thing that happens next is, I refuse, I do not consent to be governed. So to be governed is in complete violation of Mother Nature's ethical perspectives. Really, really fascinating. Now, the reason why all of this is important is because authority challenges God, which 7th perspectives are not okay with this. We're going to go through this because this is really what it runs into. With all the perspectives, every one of this is going to have a problem. Now, not every one of them, just the first 5 perspectives is going to have a problem with this. I would say that even the 5th perspective has got this figured out. 5th perspectives have got it figured out. They lack accountability, but they have figured out that they're the ones in charge, which is why they are CEOs, which is why they are business owners, because they have figured out that they don't need a government, which is why I also refer to the 5th and 6th perspective as cultivators, because they have figured this out. So it's only the foundational perspectives 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first perspective says, mommy is in charge. The 2nd perspective says, God is in charge. Or they say the husband is in charge. Or the head of the household is in charge. Or the mob boss is in charge. The 3rd perspective says, I am in charge. But the 3rd perspective realizes that they need law and order. And the 4th perspective steps in and says, law is in charge. At the 3rd perspective, when they realize that the self is in charge, they are in charge without law or order, which is why 3rd perspective aggressors are the violent, the abusive, the rapist, the serial killers, and the war people. If you are violent, you're probably not watching this video. If you know someone who's violent, you are. There is no most likely. You are. That person is a 3rd perspective aggressor. All violent people are 3rd perspective aggressors because they have the value or lack thereof of, I am in charge no matter what, and I hold no value for you. That is 3rd ethical perspective. Now, the 3rd ethical perspective passive is the, I don't do violence. That's your passive. But they're still, I'm in it for me. I don't give a shit about everybody else. I'm looking out for myself. The 3rd ethical perspective is the what's in it for me. That is very much your 3rd ethical perspective, period. Now, the difference between what's in it for me, that 3rd ethical perspective, and the 6th ethical perspective is the 6th ethical perspective says, I value all because we are one. Value all, for we are one. The 5th ethical perspective says, I value my success. I value my own ability to self-govern. So 5th ethical perspectives have personal law. They have personal order. And they have personal law, order, rules. And they have learned not to project them onto other people. They project those onto themselves. So 5th ethical perspectives are pretty solid. They're really fucking good. They have not yet learned how to value others, but they have law, order, and rule in place. Now, the 4th ethical perspective understands the importance of law, order, and rule. Now, the 4th ethical perspective is supposed to be taking that law, order, and rule, and they are supposed to be learning how to self-rule. That is what they are supposed to be learning. How to self-control. How to mind their own fucking business. Really? That is what the 4th ethical perspective is supposed to be learning. How to mind their own fucking business. If they do not do this, 2 things happen. The first thing that happens is they don't grow. They get stuck. The second thing that happens is they project these laws, orders, and rules on everybody else. And now you got fascism. So they've now taken self-authority and they've put it on the law book. So now they will mindlessly, obediently do whatever the law book says. And the law book says, don't kill. So we're good. So we're good because the law says not to kill. And because they don't think for themselves and the law says don't kill, we're pretty good from the fourth perspective. Thank God. Once they figured out to put that in the law books, we're good. We're good. We're fine now. The third ethical perspective says, fuck the books. What's in it for me? And they're the ones going around with all the problems. Literally, every criminal is a third ethical perspective. That's really vague. No, it's not. Because there are people who smoke weed, and then there's third ethical perspective cops who throw those people who smoke weed into prison, and they didn't do anything wrong because they know how to self-govern and they were minding their own business, but the cops weren't. So there's a lot of little shit like that, but that's the mess of the system. And then you've got the second ethical perspectives who, for the most part, they have their religion that tells them what to do. And because their primary authorship is God, which says, thou shalt not kill, they're pretty good too. And because the caregiver, ethical perspective one, because they value whatever the caregiver says, and most caregivers are absolutely religious focused and religious based, and or are at least head of the household based, which leads to the fourth perspectives who go, hey, we got to follow the law books. So the second perspective says, okay, husband says we have to follow the law books, we're following the law books. And then the first perspective says, okay, mommy says we're following the fourth perspective who follows the law books, we're going to follow the law books. So now you have the makeup of the first, second, and fourth perspective. Meanwhile, the third perspectives are still going around going, what's in it for me? And they're the ones running all over the place. In most cases, doing all the crimes. But when you get to that fifth ethical perspective, that's when you've learned how to mind your own fucking business. To live and let live. That is what you learn at the fifth ethical perspective. Live and let live. At the sixth ethical perspective, you learn accountability. You learn how fucking much of an asshole you were. And then you've got to answer to yourself for what you've done. And a lot of sixth perspectives really struggle with that. Understandably so. It is the trial of the sixth ethical perspective is now shouldering the brunt of all of your wrongdoings. And now you have to answer to your own ethics for it. It's really brutal. After that, you have figured out self-authority, and it never gets compromised again. Never. You're done. Because you have learned it and you have figured it out. Now, when you live under the ethical law of natural order, you follow these things, and by the time you are 6 fucking years old, you've internalized these lessons, which means worst case scenario, if you follow the ethical law of natural order, the majority of people who do this under the ethical law of natural order are a bunch of 6-year-olds. So it's okay because they're 6. They can't really do anything to the world. But that's not what's going on, because people abandoned the ethical law of natural order and they swung over to the hierarchical order that is the fourth perspective's agenda of throwing all of this garbage in everybody's face, saying everybody has to conform because they don't know how to mind their own fucking business. Now we are all off of the ethical law of natural order, and we're all doing what the fourth perspective says we have to do, and they're using aggression, police, violence, law books, abuse, and any other fucking means they can to make sure everybody else is obedient. Don't believe me? Walk away and watch the resistance. Resistance is the metric to determine just how abused and how not free you are. Try to walk away. You'd be surprised at how little you can't. That being said, when I broke all of this down, when I evaluated all of it, it all comes down to who's in charge. You have an entire system that likes to think it's in charge. You have a bunch of law books that likes to think it's in charge, put there by a bunch of people who are power hungry. When I looked up the word authority, one of the very first definitions I noticed was the word power was synonymous with authority. Physics disagrees. And because I and all of humanity functions on the ethical law of natural order, which is logic, math, and physics, I tend to go with what physics says, because if you don't, it fucking hurts. So physics is my authority because it hurts when you disobey physics. Power is energy, and energy is not authority. Authority is origin, and you have a life. The moment you realize that you are in charge of your life, game changer. I was 8 years old and ran away from home, and I was 14 and ran away from home. And by the time I was 15, I was emancipated. I have been my own authority for a very long time. And I watched my parents' power crumble, which meant the power associated with authority is a delusion. And that is absolutely part of the problem. Power is actually in choice. And choice is 100% linked to authority. Authority is the right to decide and to make choice. And it all keeps stemming down 100% from authority. In all of mental health, in all ontological studies, when anyone sits down when it comes to human behavior, 100% of all trauma is governed and dictated and determined by whether or not the victim and or the trauma survivor accepts and acknowledges their own authority. The moment they decide that they are in charge, game over. They're no longer a victim. They're now healing from trauma. It's done. The moment you decide to keep your authority from your abuser, done. It is the victim who gives with consent, not awareness, but consent, their own authority and choice to an abuser that empowers the abuser. Victims empower their own abusers by gifting their power of choice to the abuser. When you realize that you give your abuser your own power through choice, it changes the game. And when you realize you can just take it back, changes the game. It is literally who and what you value. And when you understand, again, we're back to physics again, what value is, and that you have the empowerment, the power, the authority to empower yourself or others. And that's really what authority is. Authority is not power. It is the choice of empowerment. So you can choose to empower yourself or your abuser. To do that, value determines empowerment. So if you value your abuser, you're empowering them. If you value money, well, money is going to be your little bitch. Or I should say, you are the bitch of little money. And in turn, if you value yourself, now you are in charge. So whoever's in charge, Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, you have to consent to being governed. So if you have an abuser who governs you, it's because you chose it, because you consented, because you empowered the abuser with value. As soon as you choose the abuser, as soon as you value the abuser, instantly, they have the ability to control, govern, whatever, because you've given them the consent to, because they have something you want. Economics. Economics is physics. As soon as you realize that economics is physics, and as soon as you use power as currency exchanged via value, now you're in charge. You're calling the shots. You always have been in charge. You just didn't know it. It is literally mindless empowerment of an abuser, giving them permission to abuse you because you value them. As soon as you value them, they control you. But you're the one sitting there pulling their puppet strings. To stop an abuser from harming you, devalue them. As soon as you devalue them, they're nothing. Oh, they're going to become violent because they are resisting, because you're not free. So you have to get free. To do it, you have to deny access. And this is where you require thinking skills, logic skills, imagination to literally make a plan of action and get the fuck out of Dodge. If somebody is abusing you, get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Stop valuing their pretty little emotions over your health. And that's really what it comes down. It's their emotions versus your health. And at the end of the day, we are abused because we don't value our health enough. No matter how many times I turn this around, it always comes back to authority, which is the starting point for this physics formula. That if I want it, when I write this formula, because I definitely want to and I will be writing it, it keeps coming back to the baseline is how much authority do you have? And how much authority you have is literally measured on the resistance. Resistance literally converts itself to pain. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if you have a significant amount of control over you and you resist that control, you're going to be able to measure your pain. You're going to be able to feel the pain, to measure it, to go, oh, that's how X I don't have. That's how little authority I have. So the baseline for your mental health is your self-authority, which is going to be equal to the resistance, which is going to translate into pain. Now, if you have 100% self-authority with zero resistance, then you will have zero pain. If you have 50%, oh, here it is. Oh, I found it. Here it is. Now I can measure. Now I can do this. You can't write a physics formula if you can't measure it. If you have 50% self-authority with 50% resistance, then you will have 50% of pain. If you have zero self-authority with 100% resistance, then you are going to have 100% of pain. Self-authority plus resistance it's not plus. What is this? Subtract. Self-authority minus resistance equals pain. I do believe I have the first formula. Self-authority minus resistance equals pain. So if you have 100% self-authority, which is also known as freedom, yes, freedom, and you have 100% resistance, well, then you don't have that. You can't have it. You cannot have it. You cannot have 100% resistance and 100% freedom. Freedom is in ratio to resistance. So it's self-authority in ratio to resistance equals pain. And that is your baseline. Now, there's another part to this formula. That is just your origin. This is your point of origin. Now we need to measure. So first you have to define your point of origin. So to define your point of origin, you need the formula self-authority plus minus your resistance equals pain. That's going to give you your baseline, which is going to be your point of origin. The next formula you need is you need to now define the y-axis. The y-axis is going to be where you ethically want to be. That's going to be your ethical natural law. Now, this is where there's going to be a frequency measured, literally an actual frequency, a frequency. So it's going to be your ethical frequency, ethical perspective frequency, which I do not yet have this, but I will. So once you have your ethical perspective frequency, minus the baseline point of origin, ethical perspective frequency, which is your destination, your y-axis, minus your point of origin, that what is this? Quantity of suffering. Quantitative of emotional quantity of emotional imbalance, emotional energy imbalance. The quantity of emotional energy imbalance. Ethical natural law is the ideal baseline that every self system needs to be defined on, which is 100% self-authority and zero resistance. That is the baseline formula. 100% self-authority and zero resistance equals freedom and the ideal self system. Rate of growth is in here somewhere also. It's your rate of growth. The y-axis of the ethical perspective frequency. I need to figure out how to measure ethical frequency. I have studied light frequency. I have studied thermal frequency. I have studied sound frequency. Electrical frequency. Electrical frequency. Electrical frequency is what electrical frequency is what the perspective ethics run on. So self-authority minus the resistance equals your pain and also your level of freedom and your stable self-system. There you go. Because balanced energy is defined by the ethical law of natural order, consent to govern the self based on logic, math, physics, and economics. The ethical law of natural order with the rate of growth. Because we're on a spiral. The balanced self is defined by ethical law of natural order, consent to govern themselves with the rate of growth without resistance. Balanced energy is defined by ethical law of natural order, consent to govern the self with rate of growth without resistance. Therefore, the baseline for the self is self-authority without resistance equals no pain. Literally 100% self-authority, zero resistance equals zero pain. Equals freedom. Your y-axis is your natural ethical perspective. It's your natural ethical perspective, the one that Mother Nature says you should be evolving and growing at in order at a precise time without any resistance or interference from assholes. That is your y-axis, your natural ethical perspective. That is where you should be. That is your destination point. You should be aligned, which explains why I live in the future, at your destination point. You should be at your destination, which is your future, which is why I live in my future. But if you've been tampered with, then you will need to take into account the y-axis natural ethical perspective minus your baseline. Now, your baseline should be set to 0, which should be freedom, 0 resistance, and no pain, equals the quantity of emotional energy imbalance, interference. We have a word for that in physics. Quantity of emotional energy imbalance, interference, and resistance. I think that's the formula. The only thing I have to do now is figure out the actual frequency of the ethical perspectives, which we can do. I know we can do this. Oh my God, I know we can do this. Electromagnetic waves. The only piece I am now missing Electrical current. There's only one piece left that I am missing, and I do mean only one piece, and that is, how do you measure? I need to talk to my neuroscientist friend. With this formula, you plug it in literally, and you'll be able to solve your mental illnesses. You'll be able to solve everything. You'll be able to measure immediately, oh, I have this many joules out of alignment of my core self. I need to return to my ethical law of natural order. And Mom, I love you, but I'm going to align to my ethical law of natural order. Now, parents love their children, and they will say, I understand this. So yes, how can I help you? This is how you can help your children get to the ethical law of natural order. My God, this is so simple. Because it's true. Thank you, Newton. Yes. This is so fucking simple. Okay. All right. Electrical current. I need to figure out how to measure electrical current. Well, I mean, it's already been done. See, I want to say it's magnetism. Come on, come on, come on. I need to know how to measure frequency. Magnetic frequency. Or batteries. This is where we all get into batteries. See, the other thing is you can measure the amount of abuse you suffer by the equal, and it is the, well, any reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you are abused X, then that is going to transfer over into an electrical current, which is going to transfer into a chemical current, or an electrical energy, which transfers over into a chemical energy, your hormone, which transfers over into the emotional energy, which then gets stored into you as emotional stored potential energy, which then will disrupt your resistance. No, it's not, because that's not the trauma. You see, and this is not the trauma. I know this. It's not the trauma. It's not the abuse, the catalyst that comes in. It is your resistance to the trauma that's the problem. It is you resisting it. Because as soon as you resist the trauma, you surrender your self-authority. Now you have, bada boom, your self-authority is now compromised because you have resisted the energy. You need to take that energy, convert it over into kinetic energy, and say, fuck off, don't do that to me. And you need to use your self-authority to define, reevaluate, reconsider, and then you pull in the economics battery, boom, the AIDNS with the open-closed current, and then you use your emotional transaction for human connection to rebalance, realign the self-authority to reduce the resistance, to keep your freedom and your self-authority. Therefore, you will have no trauma and you will remain balanced with your ethical law of natural order. This is so logical. I'm very happy right now. So I just need to figure out how to measure frequency within these 12 ethical stages. That's it. And I know it's here. It's at the tip of my brain. I can feel it itchy. Electromagnetic waves. I know it's here somewhere. Gamma ray, X-ray, ultraviolet, infrared, microwave, radio wave, long radio wave. I found the electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light is there. Where's sound? Frequency. How do I measure persons? See, ADHD people, you are my people, because you are what happens when you suppress the frequency and you live. Imagine taking an AM FM frequency that exists at 10.7 hertz, and it's forced to live over at the ultraviolet ray side of the spectrum. You are living on the wrong side of the spectrum. That's all that this is. Okay, I want the electromagnetic spectrum. Electromagnetic spectrum. And I believe, ooh, I love this thing. Yes, I love this thing. This is my home. Oh my God, this is my home. Where is sound? I don't see sound waves on this. Sound should be here. Frequency, 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 frequency. We're on the same frequency. Okay. I don't have any equipment. How? There's got to be a home test. I know there's a home test. They measured frequency long before we had equipment. Let's go back to the basics. How do you measure frequency? Frequency was my first science. Music. To measure frequency with a digital multimeter. How to measure frequency. How to use the basic meter. I want to know how you measure frequency before they had the ability to measure frequency. How to measure frequency of my body. Frequency measurement. How to measure frequency with an oscilloscope. Come on, come on. No, let's go. We got to go early. We got to go back. All right, let's Google frequency. I don't want Britannica. I want Wiki. Wiki is my thing. It's a swinging pendulum. We are metronomes. Oh. Time. Oh, this is my world. Beats versus time. Me, 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 me. About 2 weeks ago, I was watching Stranger Things, and I mentioned this. I said the children were all saying me over and over again in repetition. And after 2 seconds, they synchronized their me's. Each of them lined up, and they found the average. And then they all unanimously punched out the word me, me, me. An average of the frequency of all of them summation together in one. Every single child, however, prior to that synchronization, had their own pulse and their own frequency. And they instinctively mirrored until they found the average. Occurrences is a repeating event. Number of occurrences. Number of occurrences per of event per unit of time. Ordinary frequency is related to angular frequency. Okay, Anna, wipe the world clean. Focus. It's a swinging pendulum. Indulge, swing. It's our rate of learning. It is our frequency of learning because of the pendulum. Indulge, and then it swings to avoid, and then it swings to integrate. And I've been tracking my frequency. I've been tracking my frequency. I'm a fucking genius. I have my frequencies tracked all the way back from the fifth perspective. I can calculate precisely with resistance. I think I have it. I have tracked every single one of my learning. And I have it in ratio to the resistance. It's the rate of learning. It's the frequency of learning. December 1st, January 1st, I had a 1 month interval with no resistance. I need data. Which is why people get stunted in growth. The frequency has stopped. The frequency has stalled out. The resistance disrupts the frequency of learning. We're going to do that one more time, people. Frequency of learning. That is going to be a household name in a few years. Frequency of learning. The resistance disrupts the frequency of learning, which is why we're all stupid, because the resistance disrupts the frequency of learning. It wasn't until from April of 2023, April 2nd, 2023. You want to know something funny? April 22nd, 2023 is when I integrated, right? It's also the day, April 2nd, 2023. No, I'm sorry. April 2nd, 2015 was the day that I went into the mental hospital in 2015 after my massive, I need to get help. April 2nd, 2015. It was literally, watch this. I am 8 years. It was 8 years to the day that I went from I need help to I was integrated. I love that about me. It did not get lost on me. When I went back on those dates, I went, son of a fucking bitch. It literally was to the year, to the fucking day, 8 years. So that is like a very happy place for me. From April 2nd of 2023, when I last integrated, and then 16 December 2023, 8 months later. Why is 8 keep coming up in my... See, 8 keys, 8 years old, 1988. 8 keeps, it's all over the place in my life, and I don't know why. But anyway, 16 December 2023. That is the last time my AIDNS required any kind of an adjustment. I have not had really any kind of an adjustment since. It took 8 months to install the AIDNS and then tweak it and adjust it. Now, after I got my AIDNS in my head, I was able to track, and I did track my rate of growth, my frequency of learning from the 2nd April of 2023 all the way up to 16 December 2023. And what I noticed was there was zero resistance as of December 16th, 2023 to the present. So I finally had no resistance and was able to track my rate of growth. So for the second ethical perspective stage of the U of I to the fourth ethical stage, my current frequency is 4 to 3 weeks. I live in the future for everything always starts big and then goes small. 4 to 3 weeks is my frequency of learning. That's how often I have a perspective shift. Resistance equals the disruption of frequency of learning. This is the formula. What this means is as soon as you plug in your AID, what this means is when I go to a bunch of scientists and I say, I got a formula, they will go, oh, you have our attention. And I will say, I have math. I don't have to say anything. I just slide my math to them and they go, well, this is fact. And I say, yes, it is. It's fucking fact. I don't have to argue with any asshole. I don't have to hypothesize. I don't have to listen to another fucking thing any psychologist has to say. I can just go, physics says so. That is what this means. So that when I hand you the AIDNS and I say to you, plug it into your brain and it will fix your mental illness because the physics says so. Because I was able to use physics to mathematically calculate using the Cartesian coordinate system in opting Euclidean geometry to locate precisely what is wrong with your mind. So you're able to go 1, 2, 3, click it all together, and boom, it sets in. And you can measure your rate of growth through your resistance of your self-authority using the baseline. God, this is gorgeous. Of the ethical law of natural order based upon the amount of resistance that you face when you want to switch your system from the hierarchical, crappy system of the fourth perspective agenda over to the ethical law of natural order. And then when you click in the AIDNS, it will literally just fall right into place. It literally solves everything. It's flawless. It's fucking flawless. The logical proofs are already in place for all of this. I'm just getting the physical formula. That way I can hand it to scientists and go, fuck you all. Here's the math. So when I say to people, I can cure mental illness, and here's the fucking facts. It's not hypothesis. It's not theoretical. It's not a bunch of conjecture. And it's not empty. It's math. This is the difference. And if someone were to say, well, it doesn't work for me, well, that's because you have all of these problems. And I can literally lay out exactly what the person is doing wrong, incorrectly, or improperly, and how much resistance they have, whether it be their own resistance to whatever it is they're suffering over here, or whether or not it's because of the ethical perspective they're in based upon the frequency that they're in. You can also then measure the amount of suffering that they have. So if they say, well, I tried it, it's not working for me. Well, let's take a look at the amount of pain you are in. Now we have a way to measure someone's ethical pain. So then they can go, yeah, I'm not in any pain. Well, then it's not going to work for you because you're not suffering enough, because this doesn't work unless your ROI and your rate of suffering is greater than your risk and the work it requires to get it done. It's going to be a very different world in about 2 years, and I'm so fucking excited. All right. Thank you so much for your audience. I love you, my math people. And may the kindest of words always find you.